Flight crew denies black woman priority boarding, unaware she owns the jet they're working on. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone's quiet strength meets blatant arrogance? Today, I'm going to share a story about a woman whose power wasn't in loud words or flashy displays, but in her unwavering resolve. A story that starts with disrespect at an airport gate, but ends with a lesson no one in that room will ever forget. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now, let's get into it. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting golden beams through the vast airport windows. Travelers bustled about, their chatter blending with the faint hum of rolling suitcases and distant boarding announcements. Among them walked Sophia Jackson, her stride poised, her face framed by soft curls that rested neatly on her shoulders. Clad in a tailored beige trench coat and a simple black dress, she exuded understated elegance, a quiet confidence that turned heads. Sophia approached the priority boarding line, clutching her embossed leather handbag and her boarding pass. The gate-marked priority boarding loomed ahead, guarded by a sharply dressed flight attendant with a clipboard. Beside him stood another crew member, her eyes narrowed as she assessed each passenger stepping forward. Sophia's heels clicked against the polished floor as she joined the line. She wasn't in a rush. Years of experience had taught her that life often tested one's patience, and she prided herself on passing those tests. As she inched closer to the front, the flight attendant's eyes briefly scanned her, lingering just a moment too long before darting to the next passenger. Sophia didn't miss the subtle curl of his lip, an expression too fleeting to be outright rude, but unmistakable to those accustomed to reading between the lines. Finally, her turn came. She handed her boarding pass to the attendant with a polite smile. "Good evening," she said, her tone warm but steady. The man barely glanced at the boarding pass before his expression shifted. His brows knit together in a frown, and he held up the pass as if inspecting a counterfeit bill. "This line is for priority passengers," he said, his voice clipped, the words laced with an unspoken implication. Sophia's smile didn't waver. "I'm aware. That's why I'm here." The attendant exchanged a glance with his colleague, who smirked as if they were sharing an inside joke. Sophia caught the faintest whisper between them. "She doesn't look like priority." "Are you sure this is your boarding pass?" the man asked, raising an eyebrow. Sophia straightened her shoulders, her eyes meeting his with quiet defiance. "Positive." The attendant's fingers drummed against his clipboard as he hesitated. Then, as if deciding to put on a show, he scanned the pass with exaggerated motions, the scanner beeping softly. His lips twisted into a patronizing grin. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, tilting his head slightly. "There seems to be a problem. Perhaps you're in the wrong line." Sophia tilted her head in return, mirroring his condescension with cool precision. "What sort of problem? My boarding pass says priority, doesn't it?" The attendant's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He gestured to a nearby bench. "I'll need to check this with a supervisor. If you'd kindly step aside." Sophia didn't move. Her feet were planted firmly, her expression unyielding. "I'd like to know what's wrong with my boarding pass first." His colleague, a younger woman with her hair pulled into a severe bun, chimed in. "Ma'am, it's just standard procedure. We'll need to verify some details. You can wait over there." Sophia glanced over her shoulder, noting the white couple behind her being ushered through with no questions asked. She turned back to the crew. "Standard procedure? It seems to vary depending on who's standing in line." The man's face flushed. "I don't appreciate accusations, ma'am. Please cooperate or I'll have to call security." Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. She pulled her phone from her bag and opened the recording app. With one tap, she began documenting the exchange. "You're welcome to call security," she said, her voice calm but tinged with steel. "I'd like a record of why my priority boarding pass is suddenly a problem." The man's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed at a loss. His colleague shifted uneasily, her earlier smugness replaced by discomfort. The line behind Sophia began to grow, and passengers craned their necks to see the commotion. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but Sophia remained focused. After a long pause, the man cleared his throat. "I'll get the supervisor." Sophia nodded, tucking her phone away but keeping it in her hand, ready to record again if necessary. As the man disappeared into a side room, she turned to face the onlookers. Some avoided her gaze while others offered sympathetic smiles. She stood tall, unbothered by the scrutiny, her mind steady despite the mounting tension. Her heart, however, told a different story. It beat a little faster, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. A moment all too familiar to her and countless others who had to fight for dignity in spaces where it should have been a given. Minutes passed before the man returned, now accompanied by a sharply dressed woman with a name tag reading supervisor. The woman's practiced smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ma'am," the supervisor began, "we've reviewed your boarding pass and there's been a misunderstanding." Sophia arched an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding?" The supervisor hesitated, as if weighing her words. "It appears you've been assigned to priority boarding by mistake. This line is reserved for our premium passengers." Sophia's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Is that so?" The supervisor nodded. "I'd be happy to assist you with boarding in the general line. Please follow me." Sophia's smile didn't falter, but her voice dropped a degree in warmth. "That won't be necessary. I'd like to speak with someone higher up. Immediately." Her calm request sent a ripple of unease through the crew. The supervisor's smile faltered, and the man with the clipboard shifted on his feet. Sophia pulled out her phone once more and dialed a number. "Let's not waste time," she said softly as the line connected. "I'll handle this myself." The hum of the bustling airport seemed to fade into the background as Sophia held the phone to her ear, her expression steady, but unreadable. Her fingers lightly tapped the edge of her leather handbag, a small habit she had whenever patience was being tested. She stood tall, an immovable presence amidst the flow of hurried passengers and shifting glances. "Ethan," she said into the phone, her voice calm but laced with authority. "There's an issue at Gate 12. I need it resolved immediately." On the other end of the line, Ethan Carrington, the operations manager for her private jet, responded with a mixture of concern and urgency. "Gate 12? Is this about the boarding?" Sophia's gaze flicked to the attendant, who was now whispering furiously to the supervisor, both stealing uneasy glances in her direction. "Yes," she replied, her tone clipped. "The flight crew has decided my boarding pass is invalid. Apparently, priority boarding doesn't apply to people like me." The pause on the line was palpable, as though Ethan was processing the full weight of her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was firm, almost protective. "Understood. I'm on my way. Stay where you are." Sophia ended the call and returned the phone to her handbag. The attendant's nervous whispers grew quieter, their unease now obvious in every gesture. The supervisor, who had maintained a facade of composure, glanced at her watch and sighed, clearly hoping the situation would resolve itself before anyone higher up intervened. "Ma'am," the supervisor began, stepping forward with a forced smile. "We don't want to escalate this any further. I'm sure we can sort this out without involving additional parties." Sophia raised an eyebrow, her expression calm but unyielding. "You mean without involving anyone who might hold you accountable?" The supervisor hesitated, her confidence wavering. "That's not what I meant," she said, her tone softening into something almost pleading. "Then what did you mean?" Sophia pressed, her voice steady, her eyes locked onto the woman's. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The supervisor glanced at the clipboard-wielding attendant for support, but he simply averted his gaze, clearly eager to distance himself from the mess he'd helped create. Sophia allowed the silence to linger. It wasn't a silence of surrender, but one of control, a silence that demanded reflection, demanded reckoning. Minutes passed, and tension grew thicker with each tick of the clock. Nearby passengers, sensing the brewing confrontation, began to linger rather than move on. A few even pulled out their phones, discreetly recording the scene. Sophia noticed but didn't acknowledge them. This moment wasn't for an audience. It was about principle. The steady click of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Sophia turned her head slightly, her sharp eyes catching the familiar figure of Ethan Carrington weaving through the crowd. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, Ethan's presence was commanding, his purposeful stride cutting through the sea of onlookers. The flight crew visibly stiffened at his arrival. The clipboard attendant's face drained of color, and the supervisor's forced smile vanished entirely. Ethan's expression was calm but unrelenting as he stopped beside Sophia. "Miss Jackson," he said, inclining his head respectfully. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Sophia replied smoothly, "though I can't say the same for the service here." Ethan's gaze shifted to the flight crew, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "I see," he said, his voice cool but edged with an authority that demanded attention. He turned to the supervisor, his tone sharpening. "Would you mind explaining to me why my client was denied boarding for her own flight?" The supervisor stammered, her earlier composure now completely unraveled. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding. We were simply trying to verify the passenger's credentials." "Credentials?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Miss Jackson owns the jet you're boarding passengers onto. What credentials could she possibly need beyond that?" The crowd around them stirred, murmurs spreading like wildfire. The clipboard attendant's mouth fell open, and the supervisor's face turned a deep shade of crimson. I wasn't aware," the supervisor stammered, her earlier arrogance crumbling into a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You weren't aware because you didn't bother to check. Instead, you assumed. And in doing so, you not only disrespected Miss Jackson, but also created a public scene that reflects poorly on this airline." The supervisor opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan raised a hand, silencing her. He turned back to Sophia, his tone softening. "Miss Jackson, I apologize on behalf of this crew. Rest assured this will be addressed immediately." Sophia nodded, her composure intact. "Thank you, Ethan. I trust you'll handle it appropriately." "Of course," Ethan replied before turning back to the crew, his tone now ice cold. "Effective immediately. You are relieved of your duties for this flight. Security will escort you off the premises, and further action will be taken pending an investigation." The supervisor looked as though she might faint, while the clipboard attendant could only nod, too stunned to argue. As security arrived to escort the disgraced crew away, Sophia finally moved forward, her steps measured and deliberate. Ethan walked beside her, his presence a steady reassurance. Passengers parted to let her through, their expressions a mix of admiration and disbelief. For Sophia, there was no satisfaction in their stares, only a quiet resolve that this too was part of a greater fight she had long since committed herself to. The jet's interior was a sanctuary of understated luxury. Soft, cream-colored leather seats lined the cabin, their polished wood accents gleaming under the ambient lighting. The faint aroma of fresh flowers lingered in the air, complementing the quiet hum of the engines preparing for departure. To anyone else, this would have been a pinnacle of opulence, but for Sophia, it was simply an extension of her work. A tool she used to travel the world, bridge business deals, and cultivate her legacy. Sophia stepped aboard with Ethan by her side. The replacement crew stood at attention, their smiles nervous but genuine, their professional demeanor a stark contrast to what she had endured moments earlier. The lead flight attendant, a petite woman with sleek black hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, greeted her with a slight bow. "Miss Jackson, welcome aboard," she said softly, her voice carrying the careful warmth of someone eager to make amends. "We are honored to have you with us today. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable." Sophia paused, her sharp eyes scanning the cabin. She noted the perfectly aligned seats, the immaculately placed pillows, and the respectful posture of the crew. This was the service she had envisioned when she partnered with the airline, a seamless blend of professionalism and care. But today, that vision had been tarnished. "Thank you," Sophia said finally, her voice measured. She didn't linger on the woman's nervousness, nor did she make a spectacle of her authority. Instead, she walked down the aisle with the grace of someone who knew her worth and didn't need to announce it. Ethan followed closely, his silence speaking volumes. As they reached her seat, an oversized leather recliner in the front row, Sophia turned to him. "Sit with me for a moment," she said, gesturing to the seat across from hers. He nodded and settled in, his posture straight, his hands resting on his knees. Sophia leaned back, her fingers tracing the edge of the armrest as she stared out the window. Beyond the glass, the bustling airport seemed so far away now, its chaos reduced to a distant hum. "Ethan," she began, her tone softer than it had been earlier. "What happened today wasn't just about me. It's about something much larger, something systemic." He nodded, his expression solemn. "You're right, and I take full responsibility for the oversight. I'll personally ensure that every member of the crew undergoes retraining. This won't happen again." Sophia turned her gaze to him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "It's not just about retraining, Ethan. It's about changing the culture. If assumptions like theirs can flourish in an environment I've helped build, then we're failing, not just as a company, but as people." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. Ethan nodded again, his jaw tightening. "You have my word, Miss Jackson. I'll see to it that meaningful changes are made." Sophia studied him for a moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I trust you will, but I'll be watching." Ethan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you. Your trust means a great deal to me." Before Sophia could respond, the lead flight attendant approached, her steps light and hesitant. "Miss Jackson," she said, her hands clasped in front of her. "The captain would like to extend his personal apologies for what transpired earlier. Would you like to speak with him before we take off?" Sophia considered the offer, her gaze flicking to Ethan, who gave her a slight nod. "Very well," she said, rising from her seat. "Lead the way." The attendant guided her to the cockpit where the captain, a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and a crisp uniform, stood waiting. His cap was tucked under his arm, and his expression was one of sincere regret. "Miss Jackson," he began, his voice deep and steady, "I want to personally apologize for the unacceptable behavior you encountered. It does not reflect the values of this airline, nor the standards we strive to uphold." Sophia studied him for a moment, her silence making the man shift slightly under her scrutiny. Finally, she spoke. "Captain, I appreciate your apology, but words alone won't fix what's broken. This is a wake-up call for all of us." The captain nodded, his expression earnest. "I understand, and I assure you changes will be made." Sophia held his gaze for a moment longer, then inclined her head. "Thank you. I hope your actions will speak louder than your words." With that, she turned and made her way back to her seat, the quiet hum of the engines growing louder as the jet prepared for takeoff. As she settled in, Sophia allowed herself a moment of reflection. Today had been draining, but it had also been a reminder of why she fought so hard to break barriers and build bridges. As the plane began its ascent, the city below shrinking into a tapestry of lights, Sophia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The fight was far from over, but for now, she allowed herself the luxury of rest. She had earned it. The soft hum of the jet's engines filled the cabin, a steady rhythm that seemed to mirror Sophia's measured breathing. She sat reclined in her seat, her gaze fixed on the window. The sky outside was a deep indigo, the last traces of sunlight melting into the horizon. The world below was obscured by clouds, a quiet reminder of the distance she had created between herself and the chaos at the airport. Ethan sat across from her, his presence as steady and unwavering as the plane's course. The faint glow of a tablet illuminated his face as he reviewed the events that had unfolded earlier. His fingers moved across the screen, jotting down notes, drafting reports. Sophia watched him for a moment, her thoughts drifting to the larger implications of the day. Finally, she broke the silence. "Ethan," she began, her voice soft but deliberate, "do you remember why I partnered with this airline in the first place?" Ethan looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. "To set a new standard for excellence," he replied. "To prove that inclusivity and luxury aren't mutually exclusive." Sophia nodded, her gaze returning to the window. "Exactly. I wanted to create a space where every passenger felt valued, where the barriers of race, class, and status dissolved the moment they stepped aboard. But today," she trailed off, her reflection in the glass betraying a flicker of disappointment. "Today was a failure," Ethan admitted, his tone heavy with sincerity. "But it's also an opportunity to reevaluate, to rebuild, and to ensure this never happens again." Sophia turned to face him, her dark eyes sharp and probing. "Tell me, Ethan, how do you plan to rebuild trust after this?" He set the tablet aside, leaning forward slightly. "First, we address the crew directly. Those responsible will face consequences not just as a punitive measure, but as a clear statement that this behavior won't be tolerated. Second, we implement comprehensive training, not just a seminar, but a sustained program that addresses bias, accountability, and empathy." Sophia listened intently, her fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "And beyond that?" Ethan hesitated, then continued. "We conduct an internal audit of all customer-facing roles. We need to understand where these attitudes are taking root and why. It's not enough to treat the symptoms. We have to address the cause." A faint smile touched Sophia's lips, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You've thought this through." "I had to," he replied. "You've built something extraordinary here, Miss Jackson. I won't let it crumble because of ignorance." Sophia leaned back in her seat, her gaze softening slightly. "Good, but let's not stop there." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" She turned her chair slightly, fully facing him. "This isn't just about this airline, Ethan. It's about the broader narrative. For every incident like this that makes headlines, there are countless others that go unnoticed. I want to use this as a platform, not just to correct the wrongs here, but to set an example for the industry as a whole." Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "You're talking about systemic change." "I am," she said firmly. "But systemic change starts with individual accountability. That's where we begin." As the conversation unfolded, the lead flight attendant appeared at the edge of the cabin, her posture tentative. "Miss Jackson, dinner is ready to be served. Would you like to eat now or shall we wait?" Sophia glanced at Ethan, then back at the attendant. "I'll eat now, thank you." The attendant nodded and disappeared into the galley, returning moments later with a tray elegantly arranged with a selection of dishes. A steaming bowl of bisque, a small plate of seared salmon, and a side of perfectly roasted vegetables were placed before Sophia. Ethan declined the offer of dinner, instead requesting a coffee. As the attendant moved away, he leaned back in his seat, watching as Sophia took her first bite. "This isn't just about the airline," Sophia said after a moment, her tone thoughtful. "It's about rewriting the expectations people have, of themselves, of others, and of the spaces they occupy." Ethan tilted his head, considering her words. "You've always had a way of seeing the bigger picture," he said. "It's what makes you a leader." Sophia smiled faintly, though there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "Leadership isn't always a choice, Ethan. Sometimes it's a responsibility you can't ignore." As the plane continued its journey, Sophia's thoughts wandered to the steps ahead. She knew the challenges would be immense, the resistance, the scrutiny, the slow grind of progress. But she also knew she couldn't afford to falter. Too many people were counting on her to succeed, even if they didn't yet know her name. The cabin lights dimmed as the flight entered its final stretch. Sophia reclined her seat slightly, closing her eyes. The events of the day played back in her mind, not as moments of frustration, but as reminders of why she had started this journey in the first place. Tomorrow she would begin anew. Meetings would be scheduled, plans drafted, and conversations initiated. But tonight, as the jet glided through the darkness, Sophia allowed herself a moment of stillness. Change was coming, and she would be the one to lead it. Sophia awoke to the gentle sound of the flight attendant's voice, her tone soft but clear. "Miss Jackson, we're beginning our descent. Would you like some tea before we land?" The cabin was dim, bathed in the warm glow of recessed lighting. Outside the window, the first rays of dawn were breaking across the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of gold and lavender. Sophia blinked, taking a moment to reorient herself. The faint ache of the day's earlier event still lingered in her chest, a subtle reminder of the fight that awaited her on the ground. "Tea would be lovely," she replied, her voice still carrying the heaviness of sleep. The attendant nodded and disappeared toward the galley. Sophia adjusted her seat to its upright position, her fingers instinctively brushing a crease from her dress. Ethan, who had remained silent for much of the flight, now stirred in his seat across from her. His tablet rested on his lap, the screen filled with notes and reports he'd been preparing since takeoff. "You didn't sleep," Sophia remarked, her voice quiet but perceptive. Ethan gave a faint smile, rubbing the back of his neck. "I figured you'd need a plan ready the moment we landed." She tilted her head, studying him. "And you're always ready with one, aren't you?" "It's my job," he replied simply. Sophia's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile, but her eyes betrayed a deeper weariness. "Ethan, do you ever think about why we fight so hard to fix broken systems? Why we don't just walk away and build something entirely new?" He paused, considering her question. "Because walking away doesn't solve the problem. It just leaves it for someone else to deal with. Or worse, to let it fester." Sophia nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the window. The clouds had parted, revealing the sprawling city below. Its streets were beginning to stir, tiny dots of headlights tracing paths like veins through the urban expanse. "I sometimes wonder," she said softly, "if people like us, people who carry the weight of these battles, ever truly win, or if we just pass the torch, hoping the next generation will carry it further than we could." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "We may not see the finish line, Sophia, but every step we take brings someone else closer to it, and that's worth fighting for." The flight attendant returned with a porcelain cup of tea, placing it gently on the table before Sophia. "Is there anything else you'll need before we land, Miss Jackson?" Sophia shook her head, offering a polite smile. "This is perfect. Thank you." The tea was fragrant, its steam curling lazily into the air. Sophia cradled the cup in her hands, letting its warmth seep into her skin. It was a small comfort, but one she allowed herself in the quiet moments before the chaos resumed. The descent was smooth, the plane gliding gracefully toward the runway. As the wheels touched down, Sophia felt the familiar jolt of landing, a signal that the brief reprieve of the flight had ended. The crew worked efficiently, preparing the cabin for disembarkation. Ethan gathered his belongings, tucking his tablet into a sleek leather case. Sophia remained seated, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her expression serene but contemplative. "Ready?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking the silence. Sophia stood, smoothing the fabric of her dress. "Always." The airport terminal was a flurry of activity, its sterile white walls echoing with the sounds of announcements and hurried footsteps. A black SUV awaited them on the tarmac, its polished surface reflecting the pale morning light. As Sophia and Ethan stepped outside, the crisp air carried a hint of dew, a refreshing contrast to the recycled air of the cabin. The driver, a tall man with a calm demeanor, opened the door for her, offering a respectful nod. "Good morning, Miss Jackson," he said. "Your team is already at the office, preparing for the meeting." Sophia returned the nod as she slid into the back seat, Ethan following closely behind. The door closed with a soft click, sealing them in the quiet, spacious interior of the vehicle. As the car pulled away from the airport, Sophia gazed out the window, the cityscape unfolding before her, Skyscrapers reached toward the sky, their glass facades catching the early sunlight. Pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, their faces a blur of purpose and distraction. "Today isn't just about damage control," Sophia said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Ethan glanced at her, his brow furrowed in curiosity. "What do you mean?" She turned to face him, her expression resolute. "It's about setting a precedent. I don't want the world to just hear about what happened. I want them to see what comes next, the changes we make, the standards we set. Those will speak louder than any apology." Ethan nodded, his respect for her deepening with every word. "Understood. I'll make sure the team knows what's at stake." Sophia leaned back against the seat, her gaze returning to the window. The SUV wove through the city's streets, each turn bringing them closer to the office and the meeting that awaited. She didn't know what challenges the day would bring, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't face them passively. The battle for change wasn't won with words alone. It required action, conviction, and an unwavering belief in the possibility of a better world. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the executive floor of the sleek corporate headquarters. The space was a blend of modernity and sophistication, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the city below. The morning light poured in, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Sophia stepped out first, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She exuded quiet confidence, her posture tall and her stride purposeful. Behind her, Ethan followed closely, his tablet tucked under his arm. His normally calm demeanor carried a trace of tension, a subtle acknowledgement of the importance of what lay ahead. The receptionist, a young man in a crisp navy suit, stood as they approached. His smile was warm but professional. "Good morning, Miss Jackson, Mr. Carrington. The team is ready for you in the conference room. Would you like anything? Coffee? Tea?" Sophia gave a polite shake of her head. "No, thank you. We won't need interruptions." The receptionist nodded and gestured toward the glass-walled conference room at the end of the corridor. Its doors were already open, revealing a large table surrounded by high-backed chairs. A group of executives waited inside, their murmured conversations halting, as Sophia and Ethan entered. The room went silent as Sophia took her place at the head of the table. The other attendees, a mix of senior executives and department heads, shifted in their seats, their expressions a blend of respect and apprehension. They all knew why they were there, but the weight of the situation seemed heavier with Sophia's presence. Ethan sat to her right, his tablet already open. He began pulling up notes and charts, but Sophia didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on the faces around the table, each one a reflection of the company's leadership and values, or lack thereof. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady but firm. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries. You all know why we're here. Yesterday's incident at the airport was not only a failure of service but a failure of principle, and that," she paused, letting the words sink in, "is unacceptable." The silence in the room was almost palpable. A few of the executives exchanged uneasy glances while others kept their gazes fixed on Sophia. "Before we go any further," Sophia continued, "I'd like to hear from each of you. I want to know how you see the events of yesterday and what you think went wrong." She leaned back slightly, her gaze sharp and unyielding. The room hesitated, the weight of her challenge hanging heavy in the air. Finally, one of the executives, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a navy blazer, cleared his throat. "Miss Jackson," he began, choosing his words carefully, "it's clear that what happened yesterday was a gross oversight. The crew involved failed to uphold the values we stand for. They acted on biases rather than following protocol." Sophia tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "And why do you think that is, Mr. Hayes? Why do these biases exist within a system we've spent years building to be inclusive?" Hayes hesitated, his discomfort evident. "I think perhaps there's been a lapse in our training programs. People are creatures of habit, and unless we continually reinforce our values, those habits can override what we stand for." Sophia nodded slowly, but her gaze didn't soften. A lapse in training, she repeated. Interesting. Anyone else? Another voice spoke up, this time from a woman seated near the middle of the table. She was younger, her tailored blazer pristine and her demeanor composed. I believe this goes beyond training, she said. It's about accountability. When people feel they can act on their biases without consequence, they will. We need to ensure that there's not just training but follow-through, real repercussions for actions that don't align with our values. Sophia's eyes flicked to the woman, her expression unreadable but attentive. Your name? Camille Edwards, the woman replied, Director of Customer Experience. Camille, Sophia said, her tone softening just slightly. You make a good point. Accountability is crucial, but accountability without clarity is chaos. If people don't understand what's expected of them, they'll falter no matter how harsh the consequences. Camille nodded, her expression thoughtful. Agreed, Miss Jackson. We need to redefine those expectations. Sophia allowed the conversation to unfold, her sharp mind processing every word, every subtle shift in tone or posture. She didn't rush to interject, but guided the discussion with pointed questions, ensuring that every voice in the room was heard. After nearly an hour, Ethan finally spoke, his voice breaking through the growing tension. Miss Jackson, he said, glancing at his tablet, I've compiled a set of immediate actions we can take to address these issues. With your permission, I'd like to present them. Sophia gave a small nod, and Ethan rose to his feet. He connected his tablet to the large screen at the end of the room, bringing up a series of slides. The first slide read in bold letters, Restoring Trust, the Path Forward. Ethan began his presentation, outlining a comprehensive plan that included retraining programs, an internal audit of crew practices, and a new accountability framework. He spoke with precision and clarity, his confidence steady as he addressed the group. Sophia watched him closely, her sharp mind dissecting each point. She knew Ethan's plan was solid, but she also knew it was only the beginning. Change on this scale required more than policy. It required a shift in culture, a transformation that would take time and relentless effort. When Ethan finished, he turned to Sophia, his expression seeking her approval. She gave him a small nod but didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let the silence stretch, the weight of her authority filling the room. Finally, she rose to her feet, her gaze sweeping across the table. Ethan's plan is a strong start, she said, but let me be clear. This isn't just about fixing yesterday's mistake. This is about setting a standard that will define who we are and what we stand for. She placed her hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. This company doesn't just serve customers. It represents something larger, and if we fail to live up to that, we fail everyone who looks to us for leadership, for inspiration, for change. Her voice, steady and commanding, left no room for doubt. The executives sat straighter, their expressions shifting from apprehension to determination. We will fix this, Sophia continued, her tone resolute. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And I expect each of you to play your part. This isn't just my fight. It's ours. The meeting concluded, but the weight of Sophia's words lingered in the room like an unspoken vow. One by one, the executives filed out, their expressions a mixture of resolve and unease. Ethan stayed behind, packing up his tablet and gathering the loose papers spread across the table. Sophia remained seated, her gaze fixed on the skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply breathe. The tension in her shoulders began to ease, but the fire in her chest remained, a quiet but persistent reminder of the work ahead. Ethan broke the silence, his voice cautious. That went better than expected. Sophia turned her head slightly, her lips curving into a faint smile. Did it? Or are they just good at nodding along? They'll act, Ethan said with certainty. You've made it clear what's at stake. Nobody in that room wants to be the one to fall short of your expectations. Sophia leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. Fear might drive them for now, but fear isn't sustainable, Ethan. If we want real change, it has to come from conviction, not compliance. Ethan nodded, taking a seat beside her. You're right, but conviction takes time. Right now we've lit the spark. Let's see if it catches. Sophia's gaze returned to the window, the city below bustling with life. Time, she murmured. It's the one thing we always seem to run out of. By the time Sophia and Ethan left the conference room, the office floor had quieted. Most employees were at their desks, absorbed in their routines. A few heads turned as Sophia passed, their gazes filled with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. She walked with purpose, her steps measured and deliberate, as though every inch of her presence had meaning. Her assistant, a young woman named Jamie, intercepted her near the elevators. Jamie was efficient and sharp, her crisp white blouse and navy pencil skirt a reflection of her professionalism. Miss Jackson, Jamie said, holding out a folder. I've compiled the data you requested on customer feedback from the past quarter. There's also a summary of employee evaluations and incident reports. Sophia accepted the folder, her expression unreadable as she flipped through the pages. Thank you, Jamie. Have this sent to my office as well. Jamie nodded, hesitating for a moment before speaking again. There's also a journalist from the Global Standard who's been calling repeatedly. They're asking for a comment on yesterday's incident. Sophia's jaw tightened slightly, though her expression remained composed. I'll issue a statement when I'm ready. For now, no comments. Yes, ma'am, Jamie replied, stepping aside as Sophia entered the elevator. Inside the elevator, the atmosphere shifted. The polished chrome walls reflected Sophia and Ethan's faintly weary expressions. As the floors ticked by, Ethan finally spoke. Do you think it's wise to hold off on a statement? The media's going to spin this however they want. Sophia exhaled, the weight of the question pressing against her temples. Let them, she said. Right now, speculation is better than misinterpretation. When I speak, it will be on my terms. Ethan nodded, respecting her decision. And when you do? She glanced at him, her eyes sharp. It won't just be about yesterday. It will be about everything. People don't need another apology. They need assurance that we're not just reacting, we're rebuilding. The elevator chimed as they reached their destination. The doors slid open to reveal the executive suite, a space designed with the same clean lines and modern elegance as the rest of the building. Sophia's office stood at the far end of the corridor, its frosted glass doors etched with her name. Sophia's office was a sanctuary of order and intention. The room was spacious but not ostentatious, its minimalist design reflecting her practical nature. A large desk dominated the space, its surface impeccably organized with only a laptop, a sleek pen holder, and a single-framed photo. A picture of her late father, a man whose resilience had shaped much of who she was. As she settled into her chair, Ethan took a seat across from her. The folder Jamie had handed her now lay open on the desk, its contents spread before her like pieces of a puzzle. Look at this, she said, sliding a page across the desk toward Ethan. It was a graph showing a steady rise in customer complaints over the past 6 months, most of them centered on issues of bias and service inconsistencies. Ethan studied it, his expression darkening. This isn't just a blip, he said. It's a pattern. Sophia nodded. Exactly. And it's a pattern we can't afford to ignore. These aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a deeper problem. She leaned back, her fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. We need to go beyond fixing the symptoms, Ethan. We need to examine the foundation. What's broken, and how do we rebuild it? Ethan looked at her, his respect evident. You've always seen the bigger picture, Sophia. But this is going to be a monumental task. She met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. I didn't come this far to settle for anything less. The day stretched on, filled with back-to-back meetings, strategy sessions, and countless emails. By the time evening fell, Sophia's energy was waning, but her determination burned brighter than ever. She stood by the window of her office, the city now illuminated by a sea of lights. Ethan entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her without a word, and she accepted it gratefully. As they stood in silence, gazing at the city below, Ethan finally spoke. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? All the effort, all the sacrifices?" Sophia took a sip of her coffee, her eyes steady. "Every day. But then I remember what happens if we don't try. The world doesn't change on its own, Ethan. It changes because people like us refuse to accept it as it is." The following morning, the city was alive with its usual rhythm. Outside Sophia's office building, reporters gathered, their voices blending into a cacophony of questions, speculations, and the occasional camera flash. The media frenzy was in full swing, fueled by whispers of the incident at the airport, and Sophia Jackson's silence in the face of growing scrutiny. Inside the building, Sophia sat at her desk, her hands folded neatly on the smooth surface. Across from her, Ethan and Camille Edwards, the director of customer experience who had spoken up in the meeting, waited expectantly. "I've decided it's time to make a statement," Sophia said, breaking the silence. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. "Do you want to draft something formal? We can issue it through the press office." Sophia shook her head. "No, this can't be another sterile corporate apology. It needs to be personal, honest." Camille leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Do you want to hold a press conference?" Sophia considered the suggestion, then shook her head again. "Not yet. I'll release a video statement first. It'll give us control over the narrative, and I can ensure the message reaches the right people." Ethan exchanged a glance with Camille, then nodded. "Let's make it happen." Later that afternoon, a small recording setup was arranged in one of the conference rooms. The backdrop was simple, a neutral wall adorned with the company's logo, designed to convey professionalism without distraction. Sophia sat at the center, her posture poised, her gaze steady. The crew adjusted the lighting and sound, and when everything was ready, the room fell silent. Sophia began to speak. "Good afternoon. My name is Sophia Jackson, and I'm here to address an incident that occurred at one of our boarding gates yesterday." Her voice was calm but carried a gravity that demanded attention. What happened was not just a lapse in service. It was a failure to uphold the values I built this company on. Let me be clear. This is unacceptable. Not just for me as an individual, but for everyone who has ever felt overlooked, disrespected, or devalued. She paused, her hands resting lightly on the table before her. "I created this company with a vision, to redefine excellence in aviation and to ensure that every passenger, regardless of who they are or where they come from, is treated with dignity and respect. Yesterday's events fell far short of that vision, and for that I take full responsibility." Her gaze intensified, her conviction evident in every word. But taking responsibility is only the first step. What matters now is action. Over the coming weeks, we will implement a comprehensive plan to address the biases and failures that led to this incident. This includes mandatory training for all staff, a thorough review of our policies, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee to ensure accountability. She leaned forward slightly, her voice softening. "I know words alone cannot repair the trust that's been broken, but I promise you this. I will not rest until we rebuild that trust. Better, stronger, and with the unwavering commitment to justice and equality that this company was founded on." Sophia sat back, her hands folding in her lap. "Thank you for your time, your patience, and your belief in the possibility of change. Together, we can create something better." The recording ended and the room was silent for a moment before the crew began packing up their equipment. Sophia remained seated, her expression contemplative. The video was released later that evening, uploaded to the company's website and shared across all major social media platforms. Within hours, it went viral. Thousands of comments flooded in, some critical, others overwhelmingly supportive. People praised Sophia's honesty and leadership, her willingness to confront the issue head-on, rather than deflect or deny responsibility. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a rare example of corporate accountability. Activists and community leaders began reaching out, eager to collaborate on initiatives that could extend beyond the airline industry. Within the company, the atmosphere shifted. Employees, inspired by Sophia's example, began to engage more deeply with the new training programs and policies. Camille Edwards was promoted to oversee the implementation of the accountability framework, her insight and passion proving invaluable. The crew involved in the initial incident were given a chance to participate in the retraining program, a decision Sophia made after careful consideration. Change, she had said, starts with those willing to learn. Months passed, and the changes began to take root. Customer satisfaction improved, and the number of complaints regarding bias dwindled. The airline became a case study in how to address systemic issues with integrity and determination. Sophia's leadership was lauded not just within the industry, but far beyond it. Invitations to speak at conferences and summits poured in, but she declined most of them, choosing instead to focus on the work that still needed to be done. One evening, as she sat in her office reviewing the latest progress report, Ethan knocked lightly on her door. "Got a minute?" he asked, stepping inside. Sophia looked up, setting the report aside. "Of course." He handed her a tablet, the screen displaying an article from a major news outlet. The headline read, "From Scandal to Standard Bearer, How Sophia Jackson Redefined Corporate Responsibility." She skimmed the article, her expression softening. "It's a nice write-up," she said finally. Ethan smiled. "It's more than nice. It's recognition of everything you've worked for." Sophia set the tablet down, her gaze turning toward the window. The city sparkled in the distance, a living reminder of the countless lives her work had touched. "It's a start," she said quietly, "but there's still so much more to do." Ethan nodded, his respect for her deepening once again. "And if anyone can do it, it's you." And so what started as an act of disrespect turned into a powerful reminder that integrity and resilience can reshape even the most broken systems. Sophia's story isn't just about one moment. It's a lesson for all of us to stand firm in the face of adversity and to demand better. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button. Together, let's keep bringing stories that matter to light. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.